we're talking more for players, but for coaches too, like a lot of times they'll just say things just to say them without having that, like you mentioned a couple minutes ago, like having a thought process or reasons behind what they think, informed, like actual information behind what they're saying, an actual knowledge base to pull from. A lot of times they just say whatever they think they're supposed to say because that's what other people say, that's what they heard they should say, or they read an article for 5 seconds online and think that's the right way to go. And
go ahead, finish up.
No, that's all I got.
What would you say? Yeah,
coach, just uninformed.
Uninformed. It's crazy what people say. Like, work hard, just work hard. Is that okay? So what do you mean work hard? I'll tell you, just over the years, it's funny. It goes in trends, right? So in 2004 was my first gym, and I remember the trend word for fitness was you got to work your core. Everything was core. So if you ask someone what the core is, they think it's stomach. Okay, like that's what most people are, but it's actually a little bit more than that. It's actually chest down to knees. That's actually your core, when it includes your ass. Mm-hmm. But people think core. Anyways, that's not my point. My point is that the core was the buzzword. And then along that time, it was functional training. So core, you got to work your core. So if you ask someone what they meant by that, well, you work your core. That's the only answer they can give you. Functional training. That was the next one. It was functional training. So what was functional training? Because if it's not functional, what is it? It's dysfunctional. Yeah. Well, of course, you're going to do functional training. So they're buzzwords, right? But people buy into this stuff and they make it sound real good. You look at, when I started training down here, one of the things that people always ask me, and I didn't understand this. I know if anybody's watching and says, like, maybe they think I'm dumb, every customer, almost to a T, would come up to me and say, so, because I was new to doing this down here. So do you work edges? And I'd be like, what do you mean work edges? Like, I don't know what that actually means. And they'd be like, well, edges. Like, yeah, you said edges. What do you mean by that? Like,
that was one of my favorite.
Inside and outside edges. I'm like, well, of course, you don't skate like this. Yeah. So these are things like people just talk to speak. Yeah. And the latest, another trend that was like for fitness, the fitness side was, you hear this all the time. Hockey players have big legs and skinny upper bodies. Okay, says who? Like, who says that? Yeah. Now, you can qualify that a bit by saying, if you want to, not necessarily correct, because you can pluck guys out of every dressing room and they'll have a different body than that. But okay, if you want to say a high percentage of people that play hockey have bigger legs and ass and slimmer upper bodies, on average, I would say, okay, and the reason is that because they focus on legs so much and you don't need as much focus on your upper body strength. Oh, okay, we can go with that one. But it's just those little statements, but without any substance.
Yeah. Well, one of my good buddies, he's a baseball guy. He got drafted, I think 13th round, to Oakland. Yeah. MLB. Yeah. Big boy. Yeah. Power hitter, like big, thick boy. And one of the things that they would say in baseball is, especially for pitchers, is you don't train your chest. You don't do bench press. Is that an actual thing? This is what.
Okay, because I'm thinking like just being a dum-dum with baseball, I would say that they came up with that you don't train your chest because maybe it would limit rotation in your shoulders.
Well, so here's the thing. So the thought, and I have very limited knowledge on this. Just thinking about it right now when he was talking about it. That was one of the things that they would think about is like,
sounds right.
It could hinder your mobility, or you could have there could be a chance that you overextend or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you're going deep into a bench press, you could go too far or whatever, increase injury, whatever.
Sure,
right?
It's close to your shoulders. Like if you do a lot of incline bench, you start feeling it in your chest.
So the thing is, and then when him and I have been working out the last like several weeks before he just moved to Toronto, but before that, and he was saying like one of the things he was thinking about is like, well, what if you train properly though?
I was just going to say
right?
That. What if you did a lot of mobility to offset
exactly,
that?
Right? So it's like, and I'm not saying you need to have a bodybuilder chest, right? Or if you're a pitcher that it's smart to have a 25-inch density to you. Like that's
you don't have to have a barrel.
Yeah, right? So, but does that mean you should never do a push? Yeah. Right? Like you should never do a bench or you should never press a certain way because, you know what I mean? And that, like to me, and maybe I'm not a baseball guy, that maybe I don't know, but that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you just you neglect the training in that area.
Yeah, well, that's how it comes out, right?
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so the people miss like the nuance part of it. It's like, okay, we're not going to do a bench press to a certain load because there's a chance you could overextend or whatever, and that's an unnecessary risk to take.
Yeah.
But that's not the same as saying don't ever train your chest, which is what the message can come out as.
Well, how about this one? Because you hear it all the time. Is that people hear these words? You shouldn't lift weights until you're 14. Well, let's just say that's the number.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so we were just talking about this in the office. Is like, ask 5 whys. Why? And most people say, that's the answer.
Yeah, because they heard it.
They heard that somewhere. Okay, why?
Right.
So, but the real reason for that, it's taken out of context. Like it's so proven that. Well, first of all, if you ask the question, what's the difference between, let's say we're doing a squat, like a body weight squat, and putting a 45-pound bar on your back, or holding dumbbells in your hands? What's the difference? None. What if you're doing a bench press versus a push-up? It's the exact same thing.
Right.
So it's not.
Yeah, your body can't tell that you're using a barbell.
Right.
You know, like, you know what I mean? So you're pushing load. It doesn't matter what.
So they say you're going to get injured. So the opposite of that is, it's proven, I've read this several places, but common sense would prevail, that it actually promotes when you lift weights. It doesn't have to be weights. It could be body weights, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you lift weights, that it promotes growth hormone. It promotes bone density. And, obviously you're going to get stronger and stuff. Now there's a certain part, like before, if you haven't hit puberty and you're lifting weights, like you're setting up some neuropaths, right? Mm-hmm. Some patterns, that's okay. But you're not going to get stronger. You're not going to get bigger. You're not going to get, that's not really going to work. It's impossible to work on speed when you don't have the muscles yet to do it. You're going to say something?
Well, no, I was going to say the thing that, because I remember this, and I think my dad might have asked you this question when I went to train, was I heard it stunts your growth.
Yeah, and this is my point.
And this is the misconception. It's funny because, again, I mentioned my brother, again, we were talking about this a little while back, had the same conversation about weightlifting and how it stunts your growth.
Yeah.
And my brother was saying, well, like, there is research that shows weightlifting can stunt your growth. I'm like, no, that's not what the research shows. It shows that if you get hurt lifting weights when you're young, if you hurt like around a growth plate, that can stunt your growth, right? So the issue is, if you hurt yourself weightlifting, it could stunt your growth if you damage a growth plate. That is what can stunt your growth. But what comes out is, don't lift weights when you're young because it'll stunt your growth.
Yes. So let's think about that for a second. This is what I'm talking about, thinking, and this is going to lead into what we really want to get in the meat of is, so how many people have avoided lifting weights? Not that you have to lift weights, but I'm just saying, how many people have neglected that and start off maybe a couple years behind because they don't think they're at the right age? Is 13 and a half, or is it 14 right on when you start?
Yeah.
But yeah, so the information, or you've answered it, they're called epiphysical plates. They're in your, in all your joints, basically. If you were to break those or damage them, you could, not you will, but you could have growth problems. It could limit some of your growth.
Right.
Could. Now, if you were to say, let's say a 12-year-old kid that's starting to grow and stuff, and you threw a sandbag on his like we have in our gym, a sandbag worth 25 to 40 pounds, thrown on his back, and asked him to do squats. Is that bad? Would you have a better chance now? Is there a good chance of getting hurt, or do you have a good chance of playing hockey getting hurt? I would say hockey is more dangerous and you're probably more prone to breaking growth plates or damaging your growth plates.
Yeah.
Would you consider riding your bike or going skateboarding, or doing bench press or squats or whatever?
Yeah.
So a caveat to all this stuff is, it's not about, okay, everyone should lift weights. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that we're talking about, we have to think and train properly. Actually, in general, in life, we have to ask questions, and we have to kind of just, not ask questions, but think. It's just called thinking.
Yeah, critical thinking, man.
Critical thinking, and come up with with your own idea, not just go with the math.
You gotta try to. And the problem is, there's so much information. Like a reasonable issue is that there's a lot of information, and there's too much information, and there's bad information, especially with the internet. Everyone always says this, but
YouTube geniuses.
You can find something that validates your opinion anywhere. You can find something that makes you think what you're doing is good or bad, or whatever you want to find, you'll find it. Somebody agrees with you, and there's a lot of, you have to try to, navigate that space and why something is good or bad for you.
Yeah.
So going back to what you were saying, a good rule of thumb to go by when you're doing any kind of training is the 5 whys thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you ask why,
yeah,
there should always be an answer until you hit the end of the topic, right?
Yes.
And if somebody can't answer why for you, or whatever you're thinking about, you can't answer why to like your own satisfaction, then you need to seek out what the real answer is, because it's really easy to find bad information if you just ask why a couple times, right?
Or limited information. That's what I've always said to customers. I want you to ask me why. Ask me why I should shoot like this, and then why. Because basically, when I'm out of answers, that's the limit of my knowledge.
Yep.
Last thing about the fitness thing, because I just want to be clear about this. Can you damage it? Can you hurt yourself in fitness? Yes, you can. You can do it by understand how to do lifts and squatting and all these things properly. Because if you're doing them wrong, like if you're doing, let's say for example, a squat and you're leaning forward too much and you're all over your toes and your knees are poking out, different things like that, then that can create some injuries. But so learn the proper way slowly.
Yeah,
that's all I want to say about that.
I want to hammer that for a second, because what people are going to do is going to say, oh, well, I know Johnny who was 11 and he broke his wrist lifting weights and now his arm is looks like a T-Rex or whatever, right? And we're saying the important thing here is that you learn how to do things properly.
Yeah.
That is what's key. It's not don't lift weights because you'll hurt yourself. It's learn how to lift properly before you lift weights.
Yeah.
Right? And then that is what's going to keep you from doing that, because you could you break your wrist doing a push-up, damage your growth plate, and then that sucks, right?
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with the weights necessarily.
Yeah.
It's doing things incorrectly and not being ready for the load you're going to lift, right? But that kind of detail when you're talking about this kind of topic is often missed. So it's important. I want to make sure people heard what you said there, because we're not saying, like you said, you're not go lift weights when you're 5 because you should. That's not what we're saying, obviously.
Yeah.